On today's episode, I want to take you guys behind the scenes as to how the Michael Penix draft pick unfolded, because Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated had a really in-depth write-up on what went down for the Broncos, the Vikings, and the Falcons, who all took quarterbacks in round number 1. So we're going to break down this article from Albert Breer bit by bit, and I'll give you my opinion and analysis along the way. I'm going to try and be as down the middle as possible. I'm definitely going to give my opinions on matters, but we're going to look at both sides here as to the pros and cons to selecting Michael Penix. But I think our story really begins back in 2017, where, stop me if you've heard this already, Sean Payton recently has gone on a public tour that he really wanted to take Patrick Mahomes back in 2017, and the Chiefs leapfrogged him in the draft, and the rest is history. But Terry Fontenot was a part of that Saints war room, and I think he learned a lesson from that day, which is you should have a plan at quarterback for a long term. Meaning, don't just have your quarterback for now and think, well, when this guy's done, we'll figure it out later. No, that was the Saints strategy a little bit when they weren't able to get Patrick Mahomes, and that's landed them kind of in NFL purgatory of not being good enough to win in the playoffs, but not being bad enough to get a Caleb Williams in the draft. Now, Terry Fontenot had an interesting quote, I think we'll call it, in this Albert Breer article where he said, it's unconventional because no one expected it, right? It's unconventional because that's human nature, to say we expect something. And we say, this is going to happen, and when someone does something different and more uncommon in terms of what we expect, you say it's unconventional. I didn't wake up today thinking I needed a definition of what unconventional was, but I guess thank you to Terry for that. I mean, I read that quote over 5 times, and every time I walked away thinking I still have no idea what we're talking about here. But that was his response to, why'd you go get Kirk Cousins and then draft Michael Penix, right? Isn't that a little bit unique and unconventional? And he gave us a really long definition of it. I preferred Michael Scott's definition to what a wedding is, the melding of two metals. But I did think this next part from Albert Breer was very insightful. Fontenot is right to point out that there are fair comps to what the Falcons did in putting a first-rounder behind a 36-year-old or so quarterback. Matt Ryan was 35 when the GM was considering whether to take a quarterback in 2021. Alex Smith was 32 when the Chiefs took Mahomes, and he was 34 when Washington tabbed Dwayne Haskins. Aaron Rodgers was 36 when the Packers drafted Jordan Love. So, not apples to apples at all. And that was one of my biggest gripes with the pick, was very quickly in the press conference, the Falcons said, we're using the Green Bay Packers model. And I don't think that's a fair model to compare to with this draft pick. Neither is the Patrick Mahomes pick a fair thing to compare to, as look what the Chiefs did. They had Alex Smith and they took Mahomes. Stop. Are we really going to compare where Alex Smith was in his career to where Kirk Cousins is right now? Alex Smith, by the way, the season before Kansas City took Patrick Mahomes in 2016, threw 15 touchdown passes. Kirk Cousins had more touchdown passes, I believe, and missed half of the season. So no, let's not compare Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins. No one was all that upset with the Chiefs taking Patrick Mahomes because Alex Smith was their quarterback, a really good game manager. He was also being paid $17 million a season. So I just think it's lazy to compare the Michael Penix draft pick to, look how the Chiefs took Patrick Mahomes when they had Alex Smith and the Packers took Jordan Love when they had Aaron Rodgers. No, the Chiefs and the Falcons are in very different spots compared to Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins. And as for Green Bay, Jordan Love was picked number 26 in the draft and was 21 years old, which meant if you missed on Jordan Love and you didn't hit, not a huge deal. It's the 26th pick in the draft. You're not going to find great surefire talent at pick 26. Top 10 picks, you got to hit. You're one of the first teams to make a selection. You have your pick of the litter. You cannot miss on a top 10 pick. And if you do, that's the kind of stuff that sets franchises back. You miss on pick 26, get in line. There's a lot of teams that have missed on guys at the end of round 1. Go look at NFL drafts from a few years ago. You'll be surprised to see players that went at the end of round one you have never heard of. Falcons miss on Michael Penix. That's double whammy. Like, if Michael Penix is just not a good quarterback, right? It's just a bust. Not saying I want to see that. No. Michael Penix is not a good quarterback, and it's a miss of a draft pick. It's a double whammy in two ways. One, you missed out on an opportunity to improve the 2024 Falcons roster and invest in Kirk Cousins, who you've already invested $180 million into by getting together the best possible roster for right now. That's whammy number one. Whammy number two is you haven't found your long-term quarterback after Kirk Cousins, which you are seeking, right? Because you drafted 1/8 overall. Whereas if you missed out on Jordan Love and he was a bust and he sucked or whatever, all right, you're still looking for a quarterback, but it's not like you wasted a top 10 pick. Very different scenarios. I don't like comparing the three different situations of Mahomes, Love, and Penix. Very different. Now, has your mind changed on the Michael Penix draft pick? Yes or no? This is the pinned comment, so scroll on down and give me a Y for yes or an N for no. By the way, I know a lot of you guys are very upset with me not being over the moon about this draft pick, which we'll talk about in a moment. But ask yourself this question. When I asked you all a few weeks ago before the draft, do you want to take Michael Penix in round 1 or round 2? I saw very few yeses. All of a sudden, the pick is in, and minds have rapidly changed. Now, next up on the show, I want to talk about why Raheem Morris wanted Penix. We just went through a little bit of why Terry Fontenot was interested in Penix because he has scars from the Saints not getting Patrick Mahomes. And, hey, if he thinks Michael Penix is the next Patrick Mahomes, then yeah, absolutely. Like, so what if he sits for 2 or 3 seasons? If he's that good, I will be the first one to raise my hand and say I was wrong. But you've also put a very high bar on Penix as a result. But why does Raheem Morris, the coach of this team, want Penix? That we'll answer in a moment. But first, I was looking on Fanatics trying to find the best deals for you guys. And I don't know, maybe you like this, maybe you don't. I saw these really cool Atlanta Falcons glass pints. And if you're looking to, add some new dishware to your kitchen and you want to have a nice cold one this weekend, do it with your favorite team. Little pro tip right now, toss these bad boys in the freezer like 30 minutes before you plan on having a cold one, and it's going to be extra cold. So go to chatsports.com/Falcons Pints. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. So let's go back in time to when Raheem Morris was the interim head coach after Dan Quinn was fired. Atlanta interviewed Raheem Morris following the season. Ultimately, they picked Arthur Smith. But one thing that Raheem Morris really harped on in that interview was we need to have a plan for post-Matt Ryan, right? This was still the Matt Ryan era of the Falcons, 1 year with Arthur Smith. And the Falcons went, yeah, okay, we like this Arthur Smith guy more. Let's go with him. And ultimately, that was a failure because Arthur Smith could not find the quarterback. And so when Raheem Morris came back for his interview a few months ago, I'm sure one of the first things he brought up was, do you remember the last time we talked? I said, you guys need to find a quarterback. And you didn't because you went with Marcus Mariota, a cheap free agent, and Desmond Ridder, a third-round draft pick, and Taylor Heineke, a cheap free agent. I'm not going to make that same mistake again, or I'm not going to let you guys make that same mistake again. We are going to get a quarterback long-term, even if Kirk Cousins is only here for 3 to 4 years. I want to have the quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years by getting the best possible guy in the draft. So, despite what the comment section says, by the way, I do like Michael Penix a lot as a passer and as a prospect. He was my quarterback number 4 on my big board this year behind Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then Michael Penix. Now, I like Penix a lot as a passer, but I'll say this. When you take him pick number 8 overall, you're putting a very high bar on him to justify that selection. Now, here are some more from Albert Breer. Long story short, the Falcons' new staff saw in Penix's deep ball accuracy, his ability to anticipate throws, and how quickly and naturally he processed what was in front of him. So let's break down that middle portion right there about the deep ball accuracy. I pulled up his PFF throwing chart so you can see how many passes he had from 20-plus yards downfield, medium, short, and behind the line of scrimmage. And it's pretty eye-opening how much Michael Penix and the confidence he had loved throwing the deep ball. I mean, 21% of the time he was throwing it 20-plus yards from the line of scrimmage. Completed 43% of those passes. I know 43 doesn't sound like a great number for quarterback completion, but for it being 20-plus yards down the field, that is a great number. 1,700 yards, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I mean, a little under half of his passes were at least beyond the sticks, right? 10 or more yards. So you've got a quarterback here who's not afraid to throw it down the field, and he's got a great arm to do it, and he's got great accuracy. There are some shortcomings with Michael Penix when it comes to him missing some of the underneath, easy touch things, but sure, you sit on the bench for a season or two and learn a thing or two from Kirk Cousins, and you're probably going to improve in those areas. Now, I want to add on to this with what Albert Breer also wrote. The Falcons asked prospects who was the hardest worker in Indy, the guy they'd want to emulate. Penix was the answer for a bunch of the quarterbacks. Quote, not even close, J.J. McCarthy told them. It's Penix. And as the team scheduled a private workout with Penix for April 5th, something else happened. There was an excitement on the part of Penix's camp for the quarterback to learn and develop under Cousins, rather than as a detour to a starting job. So another problem I have with the Falcons going Penix at pick 8 is he's ready to play right now. If they never sign Kirk Cousins, I'd be way more upbeat about this draft pick. But he's 24 years old in a few days. Actually, is today his birthday? Today's May 7th. It's right around now. Or maybe I just missed his birthday. But regardless, Michael Penix is ready to play. Now, I did like those parts about tomorrow's his birthday. I was pretty close. Happy early birthday. Although I don't think Penix likes this video so far. I did like, though, about how J.J. McCarthy and other quarterbacks were like, we love Michael Penix and we want to emulate his work ethic. Those are great attributes you want to see. And it's pretty important that Michael Penix was someone on board with this plan. Maybe he was just super excited, and I would be too, about a team wanting to take you top 10 in the NFL draft, and you weren't going to say anything that would shoot that potential down, and maybe he'll reconsider if he sits on the bench for 2 seasons about that decision when he was 23 years old and had a meeting with the Falcons leading up to the NFL draft. But there is a lot to like about Penix as a passer, like we just went over, and then Penix as a human being. So I'm very high on the prospect Michael Penix, but I do have my reservations about this pick. More from Breer. They then went through the history, which showed, based on their work, that outside of an outlier year such as 2020, only 1 or 2 quarterbacks per draft class and very few drafted outside the top 10 make it. Blank, for his part, had just lived 2 years in quarterbacking purgatory and had talked about wanting a succession plan, like he'd have in his other businesses, for Atlanta's post-Cousins reality. I do agree with the overall thought of, yes, it's a good idea to have a post-quarterback plan. Didn't think they had to make that post-quarterback plan right when they signed Kirk Cousins. Probably could have waited a little bit on that front, but ultimately, all right, like I can kind of get behind that train of thought. Then you have what Terry Fontenot said to Arthur Blank. If we don't do quarterback this year, then what's going to be there next year, the year after? When are we going to be able to do it? Are we going to wait? Are we going to win for a couple seasons and then not be able to win anymore to pull that off? Terry, do you remember when you cited the Packers model of getting a quarterback when you already have a quarterback? The Packers model is to take one at the end of round 1. When do you think Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love were drafted? I don't think it's fair to go in front of the press and have you and Raheem Morris go, we want to do the model after the Green Bay Packers, and then say, we're never going to be picking top 10 again. We can't get a good quarterback. The Packers didn't get a good quarterback in the top 10. You can't have it both ways, okay? But I do appreciate and respect the historical standpoint. For all the longtime viewers on this channel, I have always tried to reason my opinions on this show with historical backgrounds on when players went in the draft and free agency and contracts and things like that. So there is something to be said about if the Atlanta Falcons feel like with Kirk Cousins, they'll never pick in the top 16 of the NFL draft the next 4 seasons, and this was their best opportunity to get a quarterback, I'm not going to bicker about that. That I will agree with. Now, I'm also going to say you could have had a good opportunity to, bolster your lineup for the next 4 seasons with Kirk Cousins here to try and win a Super Bowl with him instead of already using your top asset, the 8th overall pick in the draft, to go beyond the Kirk Cousins era in Atlanta. But okay, I can understand the thinking of we're not picking early again. This was our best chance to get a quarterback. Terry Fontenot also had this to say. We do something else right here, we do something else right here, and then we win for the next few seasons, and then Kirk decides to hang up the cleats whenever that is, then Michael Penix is somewhere playing at a really high level, and we're in quarterback purgatory. We don't have a quarterback. We knew in our heart if we had a lot of people in the building that loved him and expected him to be that player, and he's somewhere else, then that's unforgivable. I can respect this fear that Terry Fontenot, Raheem Morris, and the Falcons had. If they truly came out of the Michael Penix tape of, oh my gosh, I don't know if the rest of the league knows this, but we think this is the next Patrick Mahomes, and we are going to regret every single day of our lives that we're the team that passed on Patrick Mahomes, or in this case, Michael Penix, for an outside linebacker. Yeah, that could be something that startles me to death as well, to the point of I can't live without him. But the issue with that is the bar now is super high for Penix because you need him to be a superstar quarterback to justify using a top 10 pick on him when you already had a quarterback because you believed this guy in 3 or 4 years will be our quarterback for the next 15 seasons. He can't be a Derek Carr level quarterback. He can't be, I would even say, a Kirk Cousins level quarterback. He needs to be so spectacular that when we look back at it, the Falcons were not just, average pick. It was either the best pick in franchise history or the worst pick in franchise history. That's how polarizing I think this draft pick could become. So with that all being said, what year will Michael Penix start? I beg your pardon, start week 1. Will it be 2026? Will he sit for 2 years? And then Kirk Cousins either retires or the Falcons move on from him? 2027? 2028? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, that's going to do it for us on today's episode. Hope you appreciated a little peek behind the scenes as to how Michael Penix ended up in ATL.